Alright, hello guys. Today we are talking all about exercise classes for hikers. Now, I've said many times on this podcast and on my other content that I'm not a huge fan of generic exercise classes for hikers. Now, the reason why I say this all the time is because I know that following a structured strength and conditioning program is the single best thing you can do to get ready for the trail. There is literally no argument I can see in the world against that. Now, this is because it can be incredibly specific. It has a pretty low injury risk compared to other types of training. It can be incredibly time efficient and it's very effective. And I firmly stand behind that. However, saying this, I often do have clients who sign up with me who love their exercise classes. And it's simply something that they just enjoy doing and they really just don't want to give it up. And if they're wanting to work through their strength and conditioning programming, but they also want to continue to include their exercise classes in the week, which is absolutely fine and is absolutely something I 100% encourage, because the best program for you is never going to be the perfect one on paper. It's never going to be the most beautiful thing with this absolutely perfect progression, absolutely most specific workouts that I've come up with or anything like that. It's not going to be that best one on paper. It is going to be the one that you actually do and the one you can actually stick with. So if doing an exercise class once or twice a week can help you stick to your exercise and stick to your training, it can bring you enjoyment, can bring you stress relief, it can allow you to socialize, then 100% do it. I'm all for that. So unless someone does have a reoccurring injury or pain, which these types of classes are aggravating, I am 100% always open to incorporating classes into a hiker's week. That doesn't mean I should say you do it only as your own type of training, but if you're using around your normal plan training or doing around the strength and conditioning training, absolutely go for it. Now, aside from that, that's what I hear generally when people are coming online. Fast forward to these days when lots of people are stuck at home, there are so many exercise classes available online. And many hikers seem to be pretty keen to get involved with these things simply because it's accessible, it's a little bit easier to do as a home workout, a little bit might be a little bit more motivational, might be a little more fun, and it's just something that's easy to put in. So today I just want to dive into exercise classes a bit for hikers and give you my opinion around which ones can be a great addition to your training week and which ones you might potentially want to limit. Now, as I mentioned before I say anything else, if you do have some type of regular ache, pain, or injury, and the class is aggravating it, that's a clear sign you really shouldn't be doing it. The same goes for any type of training. If it causes you pain, please don't do it. Now, the reason why I say this is because I hear so many hikers coming to me on my training programs, and they're like, look, I had this hip issue 10 years ago, and it's been fine, and then I started kickboxing, and it came back, and I really love kickboxing, but I always get pain. Or they're like, I have a knee issue and it seems to only get worse when I'm doing my boot camp classes and all of this stuff. I've heard it time and time again. So the simple rule of thumb, if something's causing you pain, just don't do it. But aside from that, let's get into this episode. I'm going to be breaking down a whole bunch of different exercise classes into both green and orange light classes. Now, what I mean by this is green light means I give them my tick of approval for hikers. You feel free to put them into your week, feel free to do as much as you want of them, and don't feel guilty about it. Now, orange light means maybe you should think twice about doing them. And potentially, maybe you should think if you do want to do them, and you do absolutely love them, just include them only in short-term bunches, which I'll explain a little bit later. Now, I haven't put any red light classes in here because, as the old saying goes, never say never. If I tell you not to do something and it is something you enjoy, you're probably going to ignore me and just do it anyway. So there's not really that much value in red lights. So we're sticking to green and orange lights today. So let's get into it. Green light classes, things that I fully condone for hikers. Number one, cycle classes. Any type of cycle class, whether it's a cycle class in a gym, whether it's something like Peloton, or anything on a bike in which you're working through programs or classes, I'm all for it. Cycling can be a great way for developing aerobic conditioning for hiking, can be a great way of developing muscular endurance in some parts. It's not going to really grind down the body, it's not going to put you in injury risk, and it's a great way of training. So anytime you want to do a cycle class or a Peloton class or anything similar to that, absolutely go for it, 100% get around it. Next one is step classes. Step classes, I'm absolutely fine with hikers doing. It's really, really a fun way of developing some muscular endurance in the legs, getting a decent cardiovascular response, and it can be great fun for a lot of people. So I'm all for step classes as long as you don't have any foot or knee or shin issues or anything like that. But absolutely go for it. Yoga classes is another one I absolutely love. So yoga can be a great way just to help aid your recovery, help improve mobility a little bit, help relax you. Now, when people say it's a really good way of getting strong, I would probably argue against that and say it's not an incredibly effective way of getting and developing strength. It can make you a little bit stronger, but it's definitely not in the more effective ways of doing it. But that saying that, I still have no problem with hikers putting into their week, and I actually would firmly encourage it. So I'm all for yoga. The next one is Pilates. So Pilates I'm all for as well. Now, I used to do a lot of Pilates when I first started training in my athletics days. It's a really, really great way of sort of just learning about core control, learning a little bit about how the body moves and keeping things slow. For me, I couldn't really see myself doing a 60-minute Pilates class anymore. It would probably be the last thing in the world I'd want to do. It's a little bit boring in my eyes, but if you enjoy it, absolutely go for it. It's only going to bring you benefits on the trail. It's only going to bring you benefits for helping develop core stability, and it's only going to bring you benefits to helping reduce a little bit of stress. So if you like a bit of Pilates, 100% go for it. And the final one in my green light classes is one you might not have expected to come up here, but is Zumba classes or any type of dance classes. Now, not that I'd say this is a super effective way of training, of getting fit, but purely because it's fun, and if you like that type of exercise, absolutely go for it. It's a gentle way of developing a little bit of aerobic fitness. It's something that's fun. It's going to relieve stress. It's going to be, a good social situation. So if you do enjoy your Zumba classes or you do enjoy dance classes or whatever, go for it. Why not? Fit that into your week. And any one of those classes, not only in this time when you're training from home, but if you are doing a normal program and you want to fit things around it, absolutely go for them. They're my green light classes. Now, the next ones, we're going to be talking about orange light classes. So these are the ones I usually try to steer people away from, purely for the fact that I don't think they're super effective at doing what they do, for a hiker, I should say. So if they're trying to improve fitness or strength, I don't think they're incredibly effective for hikers as a whole. But I do know a lot of people really, really enjoy these classes. So if you do enjoy these classes that I'm about to mention, and you really, really, really want to fit them in somewhere in your training, I would probably recommend you can do them, but maybe limit them to 4 to 6 week blocks at a time. Now, what I mean by this is a lot of the classes I'm about to mention, and most exercise classes in general, they don't really have a very, very good long-term progression, meaning that they'll sort of just rely on intensity, and meaning you get into this exercise, you train, you go hard. Initially, it's really difficult. You start to get fitter. You can push yourself. But then it comes a point, usually around the 5 to 6 week mark, where you can't really go that much harder. And you sort of like all those initial results where you start feeling really great, start feeling amazing. It all starts to slow down. And it's just a maintenance thing. And so many people experience this in types of classes. And physiologically, it does make a lot of sense. And if you are doing this type of class that I'm about to mention, if you limit it to 4 to 6 weeks blocks at a time, and you might do one class for 4 weeks, another class for 4 weeks, another class for 4 weeks, that's probably going to be a lot more effective way of you training than just doing the same class for 12 weeks at a time. You're probably going to get a lot more benefits. You're probably going to get a lot more feel a lot fitter. You're going to probably have a lot less chance of injury when you're doing these types of classes. So these orange light classes, either limit them in your training or keep them to 4 to 6 weeks blocks at a time. Now, the first one I'm going to talk about is generic HIIT classes, which I've talked about a lot on this podcast. I'm not a huge fan of HIIT in general for hikers, and HIIT classes are just not a great way of hikers training, purely for the fact that they never think about progression over the long term. It's just go harder, 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 harder. I've yet to see a HIIT class where they really think about balancing exercises out, and there tends to be a few movement patterns that are just repeated, leading to a huge amount of knee, shoulder, and lower back issues again and again and again and again. I'm sure there's classes out there which take more time, more care of people, but I've really, really personally yet to come across them. And if you're training from home and you're doing these classes from home with exercise options are quite limited, that's going to be even worse. I'm not a generally big fan of HIIT classes as it is, so if you are doing these things, maybe try to limit it to 4 to 6 week blocks at a time. Maybe just try not to do it all the time unless you absolutely love it, but I would say think again if you can. Same thing goes for boot camps. So most boot camps are pretty similar principles. Just trying to work on intensity, throwing a bunch of exercises at you. There's not a huge amount of long-term progression. There's usually some pretty dodgy exercises that are just really, really loved, things like burpees and box jumps and stuff like that. So again, maybe steer clear away from it, or at the very least keep it to 4 to 6 week blocks. The next one is body pump. Now, body pump is a fun class, admittedly, and it gets you a good burn. And it could, in parts, it probably could be an effective way of a hiker training for muscular endurance, just because you're doing lots of repetitions, you're getting a good burn and all of that. But just for the fact that you're spending a 60-minute class and you're doing probably 40 minutes on your upper body, you're spending, entire things doing biceps and triceps and shoulders, it's just not necessary for a hiker. So again, I'll probably say limit that 4 to 6 weeks, if at all. Purely for the fact of the ratio of how much time you're spending on these little muscles, which don't really need a huge amount of work. And then finally, the ones I want to mention, and other common ones, are the boxing and kickboxing. Now, it's not that I don't like these classes. They can be a great way of developing a little bit of aerobic endurance, and they can be a good fun way of doing it. But they're not super specific to hiking. Most of it's upper body, and again, there's not really a huge amount of progression long term. So if you're doing this, maybe stick it to 4 to 6 weeks. Now, if you happen to completely love all those classes I just mentioned, it might be a simple case of just rotating between each of those. 4 weeks of one, 4 weeks of another, 4 weeks of another. It's going to be a lot better than just sticking with one for the 12 weeks. So that is my opinion on exercise classes for hikers. Obviously, this is one man's opinion, and if I've been talking about a class you love for absolutely love, and it's something that's part of your life, and I've sort of ragged on it a bit today, I can understand you might not be incredibly stoked about me saying it, but that's my opinion, and that's coming off what I firmly believe for hikers. So if you are looking at exercise classes in this time or throughout, maybe potentially try to stick to those green light classes, put them in wherever. They can be a great way of training. If you're looking at those orange light classes, maybe think twice before doing them, or at the very least limit them to 4 to 6 weeks blocks. Now, I hope you've enjoyed this episode today, guys. I hope you've gotten a little bit of value out of it. If anything wasn't so clear, as always, reach out to me, let me know. If you have gotten a little bit of benefit out of it, I would love if you could share this with another hiker who might be doing exercise classes, who might get some benefit out of it. I really appreciate to help grow this podcast. So have a lovely day. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk to you very soon. Bye.